Well, this is quite a topic this month. It not only affects the people up in California and Arizona, but also, there's a wonderful article about the water shortages in Mexico and the water stress. And then from a global standpoint, it's really a mess. Comments at all?
Well, I know in
Thinking
the
about
in Puerto Vallarta, in the historic district, there's been a building curfew. They can't for new buildings because they've been having problems, and there's just been they've overbuilt the infrastructure.
Mhm.
That is true. But did you see the statistics about 80% of the world's going to be under a water stress?
That's a big number.
That's a big number.
Yes.
I don't think I've met Wendy.
Wendy is our daughter.
Hi, James.
Hi,
She really
good to
enjoyed
see
your
you.
articles because she's in the law area. She loved the historical perspective on the riparian laws.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, very much.
It's a long story, an old story.
Yes.
Some of us have lived it all our lives, but you city folk tend not to have done so. The folks that grew up on farms or now live in rural areas, we're seeing this very not only immediately, but for all my life. The whole idea of who controls the water, and yeah, very important.
And
Well, and led to wars.
a legal
The
issue
article
rather than a
discussed water
natural issue.
wars.
Hmm?
Some
I
of
missed.
the articles discussed the history of water wars.
Right. They go back. Um, they go back a long time.
Now,
And
is there any chance of these water rights being renegotiated for the modern era, or are we stuck with these water rules from 100 years ago?
or 10,000 years ago, they
Uh-huh.
basically haven't changed. The group that has the power controls the water. The specific rules, be they common law, British riparian rights, or American regulations, or China's attempt to control water. Um, it all depends on who's in charge. That's never changed.
Well, the new wrinkle is the multinational corporation buying water up. For instance, Nestle's.
Correct. Nestle's been pumping illegally pumping water out of many places, not just in the US, for 50, 100 years. And nobody stops them because they own the people who could stop them.
Two things China popped out at me in looking at this thing. One was a statement that it's all a matter of political will, of which there is none. And the other was statistics that dropped out was that 70% of water usage is from our agriculture around the world.
Correct. And at least 30% of the water big ag uses has always been wasted runoff.
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons agriculture adds to our pollution, because 30% of the water they use ends up back in the rivers and the aquifers, but now filled with fertilizer. And if one of the class A suggestions in the reading we had was drip irrigation rather than gravity flow, and that works, but it cuts down on profits. Big ag does not like it when you cut down on their profits. We could
There's also a motivation by agriculture of cutting back their water consumption, because in subsequent years they will have a smaller allotment.
correct. But yeah, that's definitely a factor, but mostly there's no motivation for big ag to cut down on water use because, as I said, they own the people that control how much water they get.
I read that 70% of the time of our elected members of Congress is spent getting funds for reelection. And the amount was gross, like $14,000 a day they had to take in order to have enough money for their real campaign.
Mm-hmm.
They have no interest in spending time writing the right legislation to control these things. They're more interested in getting that money that they need to get reelected. And that means going to the people that can come up with the biggest contributions, like Nestle.
Correct. See, back in the beginning of America, 98% of those people who were elected and got the Constitution written didn't need corporate sponsors because they were already the equivalent of billionaires. George Washington owned more property than any other 500 or 1,000 people alive in America when he became president.
Well, I prefer to look at it as the fact that mass media requires a lot of money. So it's not that everyone who runs for office should be a millionaire or a billionaire, but rather the way that we get elected is through advertisements that cost a bunch of money.
And
right.
congressmen running every 2 years is a real issue because they're always running for reelection.
Exactly.
Even more positively, they're never not running for reelection. See, that's what's really scary.
But what they're doing is raising money for advertising, not for doing a good job to get reelected.
But we're talking about water, right?
Okay, sorry for the detour.
And it's possible to save water. Here in our pueblo, we've been in a drought for 3 years, and finally, the government got around to establishing quotas for individual household use. And they set it at 200 liters per person, per household, per day. And they said they were going to enforce that. But what I realized was that they had no way of determining how many people were in each house, therefore which meters to read or how to read them. And secondly, that the company that checked the water meters only did so periodically. Most of the time, it was a total guess because we used to get water bills for periods of time that were huge water bills for our town when we hadn't been there for 2 months. So something wrong and all that. But the point is, it's possible to save water. We've kept our usage down to 75 liters per day per person in our house, less than half of what we're allowed. But that's not true of other people in the village, because Paralotta is now being, the village is being fined by the provincial government because they're over their quota. Well, guess who pays those fines? The people who live in the village, not the mayor.
But in California, 80% of the water consumption is agriculture. 20% low flush toilets in urban areas and water conservation amongst urbanites is not going to resolve the wasteful process that consumes 80% of the water.
Yes, but it's much better to bother the ordinary peasant than big ag. My goodness, Norman. We don't want to upset big agriculture. They own everything.
Well, the
the
Arizonans seem to be pretty upset with the Saudis buying water rights and land in Arizona to grow water intensive crops for export.
Right. And nothing will be done about that, of course.
I know that the consumption in a hotel is estimated at 1 cubic yard per person per day. That's 764 liters. So I'm impressed that you got it to what you said, under 100 liters a day.
We are at 75 liters a day
Per
person.
Yeah, 150 liters. That's amazing. So that's amazing conservation. As I say, we would expect each hotel guest to go through about 765 liters per day. 200 liters is a very small amount.
Right.
And when you consider that in agriculture, they're just running water like crazy. The amount you can save is not very much.
Exactly. Both Messrs. Woods have pointed out that big ag is the problem for total water consumption, but let's not forget industry, because what industry adds to the whole problem is they pollute the water and therefore reducing the amount of fresh water that we have to drink. But that's the same problem.
And yet it doesn't have to be so. Whether you're looking at the Tesla factory in Berlin that recycles water, or in Singapore, where they reuse even wastewater to where it's pumped back throughout the system.
Or in Israel, where they recycle 86% of their agriculture water.
Where's that? I'm sorry?
Israel.
Oh yeah, Israel's also very, very good on water. Remember, they started out with basically a desert.
Well, and Israel wisely, well, before its current government, wisely made sure that surface fertilizer wasn't included in how they grew the desert. They used natural soil enhancers rather than things to grow the plants. You can put all those soil enhancers you want into the water, into your irrigation water, and it's fine. It doesn't do any harm. It's when you put the stuff in to grow the plants that it gets, it makes the water unusable for humans.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And the prevalence of drip irrigation rather than the wasteful distribution of water for agricultural purposes elsewhere.
Correct.
somebody tried to introduce drip irrigation here in the Alta Empordà in Catalonia, in my little region here, and he put it all in with very expensive brass piping. It was all ripped out and stolen the day after it was installed because it didn't fit in with local custom. He hadn't paid homage to the people that control the water. So, Bob, I'm just saying it's going to be really difficult to deal with this issue because nobody who is in charge of it gives a damn about how many people die from lack of potable water. Because most of the people who will die because of lack of potable water don't buy things. So who cares about them?
They're in
That's
Somalia.
okay. Go
Who
ahead.
knows where it is?
See, for most of these people, the more people who die in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, the better, because there'll be less people getting in their way to exploit the resources. So
Yeah,
some drought and famine and genocide in sub-Saharan Africa is just fine with the people in charge.
I should point out that Las Vegas has not found additional sources of water. They've just been able to control their consumption. Singapore, on the other hand, gets water from Malaysia and, surprise, Indonesia. They have undersea pipes that go to the islands of Batam and Bintang, and they're actually Singapore Public Works employees on those islands, and I've seen them. I've been there. So it's very, very.
I never heard of that.
Yeah.
Has anybody else heard of that? I've never heard of that.
No, I hadn't. I didn't know that either.
That's why I mentioned it.
Thank you.
Wow.
So
Where
Singapore is doing more
these-
than recycling wastewater.
Well, they didn't want to be dependent on Malaysia for their water because Malaysia could threaten to cut it off at any point. So they wanted to have some independence. So they also arranged for water from Indonesian islands.
Okay, interesting.
Was that an issue in Hong Kong, in the reunification of Hong Kong? When the Chinese threatened to cut off the water?
You bet. There's no way on earth that Hong Kong has enough potable water.
Mm-hmm.
So many millions of people in such a small area.
Fabulous. You don't happen to know what these pipes from Indonesia to Singapore are made out of, do you? Or how vulnerable they are to interruption?
I don't know what they're made of, but I'm sure that the Singapore government knows what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. That's what amazes me. Singapore obviously has secured its underwater water pipes, and somehow Europe can't secure its underwater oil pipes. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, the actual distance to Bintang and Batam is not that great. When I was on Batam, I used an antenna to get cell phone reception. So I could actually be connected to the Singapore towers from Batam. It's, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 miles, not very much at all.
Interesting.
Whereas the pipelines across north of Germany, whatever that's called.
Yeah, it's much longer.
Yeah, much, much longer. Harder
700 miles.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
But I think that the G7 should be more active in minimizing climate damage, including lack of water. I consider Pakistan which largely was flooded and didn't have the hydroelectric dams that would have moderated the flooding. It provided electricity. And that poor countries may not be able to invest sufficiently, but it's a better place for us to be spending money than in our home countries, in Europe, in North America.
I didn't follow that, Norman. Why is it better to do that?
More bang for the buck.
Yes, correct. But what's the long-term effect of improving the lives of people in Pakistan and Kazakhstan and all that? Where does that bring the world?
Not having people starve to death probably is beneficial for society.
I agree.
Stopping the methane leaks from Turkmenistan, which are greater impact on the environment than all of the United Kingdom. Spending money in the third world to improve things is much more effective than low flush toilets.
Right.
Well, the other thing you have to consider is that you avoid climate refugees. People don't have to leave Africa for Europe because they have no water.
Thank you. Absolutely. The only way to prevent 4 billion people from migrating north is to make their lives livable where they are.
Right.
And it will be a lot cheaper, as both Woods brothers have pointed out, to improve the lives of those people than to not do so. Indeed, it may be the only solution, because I don't think Europe or the US is capable, as cultures, are capable of withstanding 4 billion people assaulting them pretty much all at the same time. So absolutely, but we need to do two things: improve their water, improve their food, improve their economy, and reduce their birth rates. That's the tricky part, because if all we do is improve their lives, then 50 years from now, there'll be 8 billion of them wanting to move north.
But the birth rates already are dropping, and now they're saying we'll hit maximum population in maybe 20 years or 30 years. So that's already happening. And in a lot of places, there are significant forecasts for reduced populations at the end of the century. Like China's population will be almost half of what it is now.
Right, but that doesn't apply to places, sub-Saharan Africa, even with all their problems.
Sure.
And Central Asia, the birth rates continue to explode. And
But
so
we
the
know-
idea is yes, reduce the pressure for northern migration, but also reduce the number of births, and that's a dual problem.
The question.
Educating women dramatically reduces the high birth rates.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
the question of demographics is actually next month's topic. So that you know. So we will deal with the fluctuating birth rates, both negative and positive, next month.
Excellent. Thanks for keeping us on the topic, Bob. Without a leader, the world is lost.
Did any of you read the report of the meeting from March, the UN meeting on March on water, where they proposed solutions? And just like the meeting on Paris meeting on climate change, they proposed solutions. But again, the political will is not there to implement anything. I'm afraid that's happening with water also. Although there's another meeting scheduled in September.
Well,
That may shed
Bob,
some
you just
light.
summarized the whole problem. The powers that be aren't interested in solving any problem that doesn't directly improve their position in the world.
Unless it's
Remember, all these
done right.
politicians are going yak 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 yak, but we all know, we all know who the puppet keeper is. It's
Yeah.
not the politicians.
Well, that's, again, as with what I spoke of, a little bit off topic. What I'd like to know is there anything that we as individuals can do to help this water problem? It's not putting in low volume flush toilets, because that on an individual basis isn't going to do much.
Was that a
Perhaps-
rhetorical? Was that a rhetorical question, or do you have an answer?
No, I don't have an answer. That's why I'm throwing it out there.
Well,
Scott,
the
what's
answer
your
when we
field
were
of
in Las
expertise is-
Vegas,
I was gonna say, Scott, your expertise is
the
in
answer when
engineering.
we were in Las Vegas was zero scaping, getting rid of vast lawns.
Do you have any engineering solutions, Scott?
Oh, there's a lot that could be done, but like they said, the political will, it's a complicated thing. And there's a lot of stuff that feeds into the problem. And, there's a lot that could be done, but most of it's pretty expensive.
Right. But cost money.
Yeah,
And
costs money.
and time.
Yes, that's true. For politicians, really, I mean, your time horizon is the next election. If you can get something done and you can see results while you're still in office, you can use that to get reelected. But if you can't, it has little value, because, whoever's elected in the next cycle, they'll get credit for it. So there's that. And I know, like San Miguel, they said, San Miguel's been running out of water. They've known it for decades. There is a plan to solve it. It basically piping water from a mountain, a higher mountain, and several cities would have to, chip in to pay for all of this, and they would all get water from it. But nobody's wanted to do it because it would cost a lot of money and take a long time to build. And, there's just not much bang for the buck for the people involved. And then, for us down at the coast, when there's, desalination is it, obviously you have an ocean out there. You can't use all desalinated water. That's terrible to drink. But you could run up to about half of your supply and mix that with other sources, and then it's drinkable. That could be done, but again, it's expensive. Plus, of course, you'd be increasing the salinity. Not by too much, considering the entire ocean, but still.
Mostly, it would do a significant increase, given that on the coast, along the coast, it would make a significant difference.
Yes.
Keaton,
It
go
could be
ahead.
bad enough so that tourists started getting their skin burned.
I was saying that there's some crops that can tolerate briny water, and you could introduce those crops so that you could mix fresh water with seawater.
Yes, and there's also been some experiments dealing with like golf courses using gray water.
Mhm.
The problem they've had with it is that they've been spraying everything. And when you spray gray water, it tends to be, it has a fairly high degree of salinity, and it tends to coat leaves. If they were using a drip irrigation system, it would work better because basically you'd be watering the ground, not the trees and the bushes and stuff. But that would require them to do away with their existing watering system and put in a whole new one.
When I built a house in the Philippines, I had a separate reservoir cistern in the basement that held the rainwater from the roof. And I had a separate system of piping that would deliver that water from the rain to the toilets, the water closets, and to outside taps so that I could wash the cars with rainwater, which of course doesn't have salt, so there are no water spots. And it means also that in the water closets, there were no rings from, having the water evaporate and leave behind salt. So it was really a win-win proposition. And we had to pay for water to be trucked in. So it was important to conserve water as much as possible.
But that did require a complete separate water distribution system in the house.
Correct.
Not inexpensive.
But not that expensive when you do it from the beginning. To repipe would be
Right.
out, just adding another, system of PVC pipe. It's not that expensive.
Was the system you installed permitted by the local government?
Ha!
Next.
No comment.
Yeah, that has been a problem because there's many of the governments have pretty strict standards on gray water, using the use of gray water. And a lot of times it's very expensive to comply with those standards.
Any system that takes even a small control over water away from the water companies is probably not permitted. And that has been true going back to Mesopotamia. It's the way it works.
Our gated community was not allowed to have their own well. That's
Bingo.
why it's in.
You mentioned Mesopotamia. That's really one of the first ecological disasters of salinization of fertile land, causing the loss of acreage for growing of wheat, causing the downfall of their civilization.
Yep.
A little bit of historical trivia.
Well, it's the small examples that really grow big
Yeah.
when you look at it around the world. Okay.
So, any hope? Any solutions? Any natural forces that is going to apply because it's going to get so nasty and cause wars?
Are we going to take a vote on that, Bob?
I'm just looking for comments. What do you think? Do you think that the natural forces of famine, water shortage, drought, migration, all of those things between the various water basins are going to maybe force some sort of agreements?
Well, they will eventually. But generally, in order to get something like that, there has to be a broad agreement that we need to do something. And yeah, I mean, still climate change. There are plenty of climate change deniers still out there. Although I think the science is in.
Science is not truth. Reality is only what you think it is.
Yeah.
A couple of observations. When I came to the States from Kuwait, I found it was quite easy to get on news shows, you know, State of the Nation, State of the State, whatever. And if one is so inclined, you could go to a television station and say, you know, that you wanted to talk on the subject of water. It takes guts to do so, but it works because you get an audience there listening. And they're interested in having people come on these shows that have an interesting topic. Second observation is I went to Washington, D.C., and was able to speak to congressmen and senators because they are willing to listen to individuals from their district. And you can help shape legislation that way. You could just send in a letter or an email, but I think that if you have the time and the willingness to go all the way, going to Washington really has an effect.
Can I disagree with that? In 1988, NASA sent their expert to Congress to testify about global warming. And that person presented all the charts, all the data, all the science, and said, if we don't do something now, we're going to be in big trouble in 20 or 30 years.
So this changed the course of history, right? Didn't they all take a turn because of this?
Right. And so what I'm saying is simply because the information's available to the powers that be, to folks like you and me, us, just because information is there doesn't mean anything's going to be done with it. So my vote is, nah, we're screwed. There's not a prayer. All these things that are going on have been going on. And now instead of just with 1 billion people, it's with 8 billion people. And yeah. And enjoy the rest of our lives. Don't worry too much about the grandkids. They'll have to take care of themselves, just like we did.
That's joyful.
Yeah, really, a little bit of pessimism there. No, I want to be hopeful and see if there's anything that we can do to improve the situation for our grandchildren and their children as well.
And
Well,
certainly
I wrote a book.
are-
I wrote a book on how, what steps we could all take. Didn't get to be a bestseller, but there's about 40 pages of detailed steps we could all take, and doesn't look like anybody's followed any of them because we're just humans.
Just humans are what got us into this situation.
Exactly. And it's
So-
what won't get us out of it.
We can't get out of it. I'm not so pessimistic.
Very good. I'm not pessimistic. I'm realistic.
Well, people have now recognized the problem. They just don't have the will to follow the solutions.
Or the
Until
power.
that turns, or the power, or until that turns, it's very dire on the world level.
But the mass migrations really are identifying the issue.
Exactly.
One of the worst hit with the drought in Central America, and we see thousands of Hondurans trying to get into the United States. There's a direct.
Yeah, if you remember that one video that showed what was happening in Honduras with the farmers there and their drought, it very neatly illustrated the issue.
Exactly.
I think from what I've heard here today, if we all do our little bit where we are, as I try to do here in Paralata, as you try and do in Ahiik and other places, if we all do our little bit for where we are to reduce the madness, that's all we can do. And it does produce results locally.
And in the end, it is going to come down to local issues.
Hmm?
In the end, it is going to come down to local issues, i.e.
Exactly.
how,
And it's always been
i.e.
down to local issues.
yeah,
If
i.e. the
everybody in the world dealt with the problems surround them in an intelligent way, the whole world would be acting in a rational manner. Unfortunately, that isn't what happens.
Oh, that's true.
So
Okay,
you
we got
folks in
Mr. Allen.
Ahihi are doing a great job. We're doing a pretty good job here in Paralata. And the rest of the world is getting screwed.
How do
Hello.
this?
Oh,
Hello there.
hi, can you see us?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Okay, I am Steve. This is Don, who you may have met this past weekend at the church. And I'm
Uh-huh.
going to go away, and he's joining. He doesn't know anything about how to use Zoom or anything, but he's interested in the topic.
Oh, okay.
How do I?
All you have to do is talk.
Just
Yep.
speak, they will hear you. Is that correct?
That
Okay.
is correct. We hear
Okay,
and see
I'm going
you.
away now. It's up to you, Bob.
It stopped.
Are you there?
Yes, we are here.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a
The-
sign in
the-
button. Should I click that or what?
You
Pardon?
don't need anything. You've
Nope.
got a live.
It's a live feed.
Okay, it's a live feed. I'm getting out of here. He doesn't know
Okay.
anything about it.
The-
Neither do I.
Before you go, it's an hour into the performance. It
45 minutes
started
into
at
the
7.
discussion.
It's now 8, and some of us are going to go have dinner or whatever.
Pretty soon.
15 minutes.
Yep.
I'm getting out of here. Letting Don, if you can deal with it, deal with it. If not, just leave. Okay.
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 Yep, we're good.
It's a nice thought, but there's James, it's a nice thought about the locals, but the issues, the regional issues are really, really important and will, I think, drive more of what's happening than the local issues. Like I was saying, in Mexico, there's 11 states right now under water stress. And
Well-
in the Colorado Basin, all you have to do is look at Lake Powell. And regardless of how much winter snow and rain they had, the land was so parched that only 30% reached on the Colorado River and flow. And you can, you can multiply that around the world, whether it be the Mekong Delta or whether it be the Yangtze, the rivers in China. It's all the same story. And my goodness, if you look at the effect of what's happening with the world's glacier system and the effect that that's going to have momentarily in a short time on the reduction of water supply to all those countries that rely on that, it's a rather scary thought.
Right. And the point is, there's nothing you or I or anybody on this meeting can do about a regional issue, but there's lots we can do about what's going on our block, in our pueblo. And if we all pay attention to that, if we could get everybody in the world to pay attention to what's going on around them and do something about it, as we try to do here, then there's a pattern there and it gets solved.
The problem is, like, take Somalia, where their major drought is happening, but they're also in those political power struggles for power and wealth. And Niger is another one, or Nigeria, with this recent coup and the effects that's going to have a domino effect on Mali and the surrounding countries.
Okay, let's take a village in a sub-Saharan region that's in the middle of a revolution. What would happen if all the people in a particular pueblo agreed that they'd put down their arms and stop killing each other? And what if that spread to the next village and the next village? Now, when it got to the capital, the power elite would be really upset and they start killing people. But then if the people in the capital stop killing each other, then there would be peace. Just a thought.
That's a lot of would-bes.
Yeah. A lot of assumptions in there, James.
Hmm?
There's a lot of assumptions in there.
Of course there are. That two people are capable of not hitting each other? Right.
I think there's a very real possibility of war coming out of the lack of water. We talked about Lake Baikal just across the border into Russia from northern China. And the Chinese right now must be tempted to go in and grab that land, if for no other reason, just to get the fresh water in Lake Baikal.
Well, of course they are. Why do you think they are encouraging? Why do you think the Chinese are encouraging Putin to waste all his energy and military fighting Ukraine? Because he had to take all of his military, guess where? All of his military out of that very region. Right now, the Chinese Girl Scouts, no offense, Nancy, could go in and take the lake.
Exactly. So a water shortage leads to warfare.
Right. And if you're Chinese, you're really smart about it and get your enemy to move all their troops out of the region, which is exactly what's happened. I've been watching this for the last year. The number of troops leaving the eastern Russian area is astronomical. There's nobody left to defend the lake. Guess who's moving in?
You know, one example we haven't talked about that's really instructive is, has anyone looked at Cape Town in South Africa and the fact that they ran out of water? They actually ran out of water.
Right. They should get some tankers and tugs and bring in some icebergs, right? Like they did in a couple of the islands in the Mediterranean.
Yeah. They're close enough to Antarctica.
Yeah, no problem. The only problem is the energy cost of moving an iceberg through warming waters. You lose half of the iceberg, and by the time you get it there, the incremental greenhouse gases you created sort of mess up your country. So there it is.
There's something I would like to talk about that's very different from the way you're approaching you guys are approaching this discussion. It seems like what you're saying is all very abstract to me. If I could just talk about a particular plant, which has tremendous potential for use in water saving. It's called Vetiveria zizionoides. The common name is vetiver. It's been used in India for, I believe, thousands of years. It it has lots and lots of different uses. You can distill it, and it becomes a major ingredient in the perfume Chanel No. 5. But the most important thing is its use in terracing, in water control, in being able to control water runoff. Um, you can there's a very large document called the Vetiver Network, which describes its multitude of uses to do that, but especially for water control. It's a grass. It's upright. It's very narrow. It has extremely deep roots. Where it was bred, where it originally grew, it was a water plant, but it has incredibly deep roots, and it does really well here in Jalisco. You can buy it here in Mexico. I'm trying to remember the name of the place where you can buy it. There's at least one in not Tabasco, next to Tabasco. Anyway, you plant it in rows that run perpendicular to the way the water runs. It will and it will slow down the flow of water and cause a buildup of soil, and will eventually, it grows, as it grows upwards, it forms terraces. There are people here in Mexico who are working on it. There's a network of people all around the world who are using it to do soil engineering.
Does this for plant food, animal feed, or what is it good for?
It's mostly, well, it has been used for animal feed. It has a whole multitude of uses, but the most important one in talking about saving water is that it slows down the flow of water through it. If you build it, it will build up like a dam.
Right. It's the same process as terracing in China and Japan and much of the Mesopotamian area, and also a similar system that beavers used to provide water retention in North America. So it's a great idea. And if we could get everybody to do that rather than storing all the water behind dams, we'd be in good shape.
You don't have to get everybody behind it. You can start with just a few people and start building these terraces. It's yes, it's like building patties.
It's a local solution. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Well, our time has reached an end. Last comments, Richard,
Nope.
Norman?
Government action.
I'm sorry,
Government action.
government action. Okay. Scott?
I'm pessimistic that much can be done without a lot more pain. It just takes a lot to get people's attention.
Don? Is it Don?
Yes.
Yes. Any last comments?
I just, my heart is with local solutions and things which you can actually take action on in the immediate future.
Keaton?
So think global, act local.
And James?
I agree with almost everything everybody said here tonight, and it's a joy. I think we've reached a consensus that something needs to be done. Maybe it might get accomplished locally. That's my thought.
Well, thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you for hosting.
As I said, next month it's going to be on demographics as an indicator of what's happening in the world. So,
Okay, thank you, Bob.
yep.
Thanks.
We will see you
Good to
soon.
meet you all.